pessoal da Bocaina, eu sou o Lucas Perillo e estou aqui com o Stephan Porembski. Ele trabalha com Inselbergs e aproveitei aqui que ele está em Belo Horizonte. Estou aqui na casa da Luísa, que é uma botânica da nossa equipe técnica. Ele está ficando aqui esse tempo na casa dela, vai embora hoje. Eu aproveitei aqui para entrevistá-lo. Stephan, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Bom dia. First of all, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself. Tell about your biological history. Where did you came from? Where did you study?
I'm a botanist. I'm mainly working in tropical countries. During my PhD, I did a study on the morphology and anatomy of cacti in Mexico. Then I changed subject. I went to tropical Africa, and I went from the University of Bonn in Germany to another university, to the University of Rostock, where I am still based. And today I'm mainly working on tropical ecosystems, savanna dynamics, forest fragmentation, and research on Inselbergs.
Okay, and you're specialized in the Inselbergs. It's a kind of rock, isn't it? Then tell about this.
Yeah, Inselbergs are very strange. It's a very strange type of mountains. These Inselbergs are mainly isolated, habited islands. They consist mainly of open, rocky faces, and they rise more or less abruptly above their surroundings. And mainly they consist of granites and gneisses. They are distributed all over the tropics. And Brazil, for example, would be a hotspot of Inselberg diversity. So everybody knows Sugarloaf Mountain, Pães de Açúcar in Rio de Janeiro, and even all European researchers know Pães de Açúcar, but remarkably, also from the viewpoint of a biologist, very few information is available about their biology. That's why I have an interest to work here in Brazil with my colleagues on Inselbergs.
Sure, it's a rare type of ambient, isn't it?
No, it's rather frequent, and Inselbergs are very, very typical landscape elements in the tropics, okay. But they have rarely attracted scientific interest. They have attracted much economic interest because we can use rocks.
Okay.
Quarrying, for example, is a big problem for Inselbergs, but scientifically, biologically speaking, they are terra incognita in many parts of the world.
And what's the area in biology that you work? It's botany.
Yeah, it's botany. It's considering the systematics of plants. So we have an interest to know which plant families, which genera occur. It's also a field of ecology, because the plants that grow on Inselbergs are adapted to quite harsh environmental conditions, because it's usually very hot. You have a lot of sun. And water is usually also not plentifully available, so plants have to get adapted, and they are highly specialized to survive on Inselbergs.
You don't have much soil.
You don't have much soil, for example, and that means that many plants are able to store water somehow in their body. So many succulent plants in South America, you would find many cactaceae. If you would go to Africa, you would find many euphorbs. So plants have to survive somehow, and we would like to understand of how plants can survive under these very harsh environmental conditions.
And there's a lot of rare species endemics.
There are a lot of very rare species which sometimes only occur on a single Inselberg, and in particular here in Brazil, it's absolutely amazing to see that some species obviously are just known from 1 or 2 or 3 localities. And you have spectacular examples among the orchids, among the cacti, and all this is hardly known to botanists. And we are now starting to get a better idea about the inventory, about the ecology. And when I came here, I was so fascinated by, let's say, Luisa's Inselberg, that she, in her study, found on a single Inselberg new species. that was absolutely unusual to me, and I think there's a great potential here in this area of Brazil to continue with Inselberg research.
And it's not even studied yet.
No, most Inselbergs have never been visited by botanists, so we have really no idea.
And you work in Inselbergs around the world. There's a lot of researchers. And tell about your research now. What are you doing?
Inselbergs occur in many parts of the tropics. I myself have been mainly working in tropical Africa, in Madagascar, in India. We did a little bit of research in Australia also. And now we would like to enhance our efforts also here in South America, so to say in Brazil, for example. And we want to create a global network of Inselberg research in order to compare geographically, biogeographically, what is really going on with this ecosystem all over the world.
Okay. And I'd like to know that the plants are specialized for this contest of hot temperatures, a little fill soil. Tell about there's plants who are specialized to these habitats.
Yeah, many plants that occur in Inselbergs have to cope with a lack of water, for example. So there can be succulents, like the cacti. They can also survive long periods of droughts without having any water, so they can completely lose all their tissue water, and they will not wilt and die as the usual plants would do. They can survive somehow in a desiccated state. So to say, they sleep over weeks or months during periods of dryness, and with the first rains to come, they regreen and activate their photosynthetic apparatus. And so to say, Inselbergs are a center of diversity for so-called desiccation-tolerant plants or resurrection plants.
Sure.
This is a very famous adaptation, which is hard to find outside Inselbergs. And another plant group that occurs quite profusively on Inselbergs would be carnivorous plants, because Inselbergs are very poor in nutrients.
Okay.
So nitrogen and phosphorus is really very rare on Inselbergs. And a special plant group that has learned to cope with nutrient poorness are carnivorous plants like Drosera, for example, the bladderworts, and for this particular plant groups also Inselbergs form a center of diversity.
Okay, sure. And talking about the Inselbergs around the world, what's the conservation status?
Inselbergs, like other rock outcrops, like the Campus rupestris, like the ironstone communities, are highly endangered by anthropogenic influences, so to say, fire, grazing by cattle, for example, and in particular quarrying. We need a lot of rock for construction works, for example, and since many people are just considering Inselbergs to be wasteland, bare of forests, no vegetation at all, but of course it's not true. With regard to conservation, there are not many people really actively conserving Inselbergs, and that will be the aim of the future years to come, to convince people that Inselbergs have a particular value for ecosystems surrounding them, but also for conserving particular plant species which are very rare, like some orchids, for example. And that will be really a big task for the next generations of botanists to come.
And also here in Brazil, isn't it? There's Inselbergs inside the conservation units. You know that.
Yeah, it's very rare to find Inselbergs in national parks. So most Inselbergs are not protected at all. So people can go there, they can do whatever they want. They can do rock climbing, they can go with their motorbikes, they can exploit minerals and whatever. So that has to be changed in Brazil, but also in many other parts of the world.
And we are here talking for biological public. Then Do you have any kind of tip to tell about the Inselbergs or botany to the person who has this interest?
There's a book available, published in 2000, on Inselbergs, and that is summarizing many different aspects concerning Inselberg research. The book should also be available here at your library at the university, and you could also have a look at my homepage at the Institute of Botany, University of Rostock. That would be another possibility.
Okay, we can put the internet link
exactly,
here.
Yeah.
And of course your work. You have a lot of articles about this subject. We can find it in your website?
You can find hints to articles and summarizing treatments of Inselbergs also on the homepage. There is a list of publications, and that might help a little bit.
Okay. That's a pleasure.
Obrigado.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
See you on the next visit here in Brazil. Good luck with your work.
I'm sure. Okay, thank you.
Pessoal, é isso aí. Até mais.